If you are still holding out hope that Chad will simply walk back through those studio doors and reclaim the role of Michael as if nothing ever happened, I am here to tell you to prepare for a brutal heartbreak. The door has firmly closed on that chapter, and anyone waiting for a magical reversal of time is going to be waiting forever. The reality is that the landscape of our beloved city has irrevocably shifted, and the casting choices we are seeing are not temporary bandages, they are permanent scars. You might want to believe that the executives are just giving him a brief hiatus, but the brutal truth is that Rory has been firmly planted into the canvas, and there is absolutely no undoing that decision. The era you loved is over, and the sooner we all accept that the old Michael is never coming back, the sooner we can brace ourselves for the psychological warfare that is actually being plotted behind the scenes. When I look at the current state of affairs, it looks like a highly dangerous, deadlocked situation for everyone involved, both on the screen and behind the cameras. The departure of an actor who has defined a core character for years leaves a massive narrative void, and the writers are now scrambling to navigate the unforeseen fallout of this transition. Michael is currently entrenched in a deeply toxic web of secrets, bonding with Tracy over their mutual disdain for Willow, and holding the ultimate leverage over Brooklyn regarding the hit-and-run framing. This is a very precarious position for a recast to step into. Rory has to carry the weight of Michael's shattered trust and his growing darkness without having the decades of visual history that Chad built. It is a terrifying tightrope walk, and if you ask me, the writers are using this transition to completely rewire the psychological motive of the character, making him colder, more calculating, and entirely detached from the boy we once knew. But let us look at the man himself. It appears that Chad has made a calculated move to distance himself from the daily grind of the soap opera world. By releasing his debut single, If You Need Me, on Spotify, he is sending a very clear message to the industry and to the fans. This implies that he is actively seeking to redefine his creative identity, exploring avenues that allow for more personal expression than reading lines from a daily script. For an actor who has spent the majority of his adult life playing one specific role, stepping into the music industry is an enormous leap of faith. It shows a deep-seated desire to break free from the constraints of his past. Could it be that he felt creatively stifled by the direction Michael was taking? When you consider the dark, vindictive path Michael is currently walking, perhaps the actor realized it was the perfect time to bow out and leave that heavy emotional baggage behind forever. Despite his clear pivot toward music, the rumor mill is spinning out of control, and you guys know I never take these whispers at face value. The chatter suggests that Chad might eventually make his way back to the studio, but not in the way anyone expects. There is no official confirmation, so we must view this through a lens of extreme skepticism. However, if we entertain this possibility, we have to acknowledge that Rory has already claimed the territory of Michael. This creates a fascinating narrative dilemma. The writers cannot simply fire Rory and pretend the transition never happened. That would completely shatter the audience's suspension of disbelief. Therefore, if Chad were to return, it looks like the only logical path would be to introduce him as an entirely new character. Think about the sheer psychological torment that such a casting decision would unleash upon the canvas. Introducing a new character with a familiar face is a classic daytime trope, but it is rarely done with an actor who so recently vacated a legacy role. If you ask me, this would be a master class in audience manipulation. The writers would be banking on our inherent nostalgia while simultaneously pulling the rug out from under us. We would be looking at a face we associate with Michael, but the words coming out of his mouth, the body language, and the underlying psychological motive would be completely alien. This implies an ulterior motive on the part of the showrunners. They want to capitalize on Chad's popularity without disrupting the new foundation they are building with Rory. This brings us to a critical fork in the road regarding how the writers might execute this unprecedented return. Let us explore Scenario A. In this scenario, it looks like Chad could be brought back as a dark, enigmatic stranger with a direct, hidden connection to the core families. Imagine a scenario where this new character arrives in town and immediately crosses paths with Willow. The psychological impact on Willow would be absolutely devastating. She is already drowning in paranoia, terrified of being exposed for the hit and run, and constantly looking over her shoulder due to the relentless threats from Jens. Now, imagine her coming face to face with a man who looks exactly like her husband, yet possesses none of his warmth or history. Could it be that this new character is deliberately sent to gaslight her? If Willow is completely isolated, with Michael pulling away from her, a stranger offering comfort while wearing that familiar face would be the ultimate psychological manipulation. Continuing with Scenario A, we must consider the unforeseen fallout for Michael himself. Rory is currently portraying Michael as a man consolidating his power, aligning closely with Tracy and preparing to ruthlessly protect his family's interests. He is learning to be ruthless from the very best. If a stranger arrives in town wearing Chad's face, the psychological warfare would be off the charts. Michael would be forced to confront a literal ghost of his past. The writers could play heavily into themes of identity and legacy. It looks like this new character could be a rival businessman, perhaps someone tied to the dangerous elements currently circling the city, like the escaped gens or the mysterious operatives working with Jack. If this new character threatens Tracy's empire, Michael would have to destroy the man who wears his old face. The sheer tension of having Rory and Chad in the same room, sizing each other up, would be a brilliant, calculated move to boost ratings. Furthermore, Scenario A would perfectly exploit the shattered trust currently plaguing the family dynamics. Brooklyn is terrified that Michael will use her confession against her. She is already being backed into a corner by Lucy, making her incredibly vulnerable. If this new character, played by Chad, were to somehow intercept this secret, the power dynamics would shift violently. Brooklyn might initially confuse him for Michael, accidentally revealing crucial information to a dangerous stranger. This implies that the writers could use the visual familiarity of the actor as a weapon against the characters themselves. It is a deeply cynical approach, but from a dramatic standpoint, it is an absolute goldmine of psychological tension that would keep us glued to our screens. On the other hand, we must critically examine Scenario B. Could it be that the writers choose to bring Chad back in a role completely disconnected from Michael's family or Brooklyn's family? In Scenario B, it looks like he could be introduced as a medical professional, a musician, or a civilian who stumbles into the orbit of characters who never heavily interacted with Michael. Perhaps he crosses paths with Trina at the gallery or becomes entangled in Ava's complicated web of deception. This would be a deliberate, calculated move to distance the actor from his previous identity and allow him to build something entirely fresh from the ground up. The psychological motive behind Scenario B is clear. The showrunners might want to avoid the jarring meta-weirdness of having the old Michael interact with the new Michael's inner circle. By placing him in a separate narrative silo, they allow the audience to gradually accept him as a new entity. However, if you ask me, this approach feels slightly cowardly. It ignores the massive elephant in the room. When you have an actor who played a central figure for over a decade, pretending that his face doesn't carry immense historical weight is a profound disservice to the viewer's intelligence. The unforeseen fallout of this safe approach might be audience apathy, as viewers struggle to care about a disconnected storyline. Let us dig deeper into Scenario B and connect it to Chad's real-life endeavors. Since he is actively pursuing music and releasing tracks on Spotify, could it be that his new character is introduced as a struggling musician playing at the local venues? This would be a fascinating synergy between the actor's real-life passions and his on-screen persona. It implies an ulterior motive where the show acts as a promotional platform for his music career, while simultaneously giving the fans a chance to see him on their screens again. However, I remain highly skeptical that such a lighthearted storyline would fit into the current dark and chaotic tone of the show. With hostage situations and hit-and-runs dominating the canvas, a musical subplot might feel entirely out of place. Regardless of whether Scenario A or Scenario B comes to pass, we cannot ignore the immense pressure this places on Rory. Stepping into a legacy role is hard enough, but doing so while the shadow of the previous actor looms so heavily is a monumental task. Rory is doing an admirable job of capturing Michael's current cold, calculating demeanor, especially in his incredibly tense scenes with Tracy. The shattered trust between Michael and Willow provides Rory with a lot of heavy emotional material to work with. If the writers were to bring Chad back, it looks like they would be intentionally testing Rory's staying power, forcing him to prove that he is the definitive Michael moving forward. It is a trial by fire for the new actor. Let us also scrutinize the title of Chad's debut single, If You Need Me. While it is highly likely just a standard romantic or emotional ballad, in the world of daytime drama speculation, we leave no stone unturned. Could it be that this title is a subtle meta message to the executives? It implies a willingness to collaborate, but only if the material is right. This calculated move to establish himself as an independent artist gives him incredible negotiating power. He is no longer just an actor desperate for a contract. He is a creator building his own brand. If the showrunners want him back, they will have to offer a storyline that is creatively stimulating, which heavily supports the theory that he would only return as a brand new, complex character rather than stepping back into the restrictive shoes he already outgrew. Ultimately, we have to question the psychological stamina of the audience. We are women who have watched these stories unfold for decades. We have seen actors come and go, we have endured sudden recasts, and we have survived the deaths and miraculous resurrections of our favorite heroes. But there is a limit to how much narrative whiplash we can tolerate. The writers are currently demanding a lot from us. They are asking us to accept Rory as the definitive Michael, to invest in his dark descent, and to navigate a deeply convoluted plot involving Jens, Jack, and a missing hostage crisis. To suddenly drop a familiar face into the middle of this powder keg with an entirely new identity feels like an unnecessary risk. It suggests an ulterior motive of prioritizing shock value over cohesive storytelling, and that rarely ends well for the long-term health of the show. To wrap up this extensive analysis, I have to say that I remain deeply unconvinced that a return for Chad, in any capacity, is imminent or even wise at this juncture. The writers have successfully navigated the transition to Rory, and introducing the former actor as a new character feels like a recipe for unnecessary confusion and narrative bloat. While Scenario A offers delicious psychological torment and Scenario B offers a safe, albeit boring, alternative, neither truly justifies the risk of undermining the current storylines. If you ask me, the best course of action is to let the past remain in the past. Let Chad pursue his music, let Rory define the future of Michael, and let the audience adjust to the new normal. But knowing how these executives operate, I wouldn't put it past them to throw a massive wrench into the works just when we think the dust has settled. Keep your eyes open, because in this town, a familiar face is often the most dangerous weapon of all.